On homework 20, we're going to start out by using a trigonometric ratio to find the side length in a right triangle. And we're actually going to use our calculators because we've got the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. So we want to think about our trigonometric ratios for those. The sine, we said, is the opposite over the hypotenuse. The cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. And the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So we want to look at our angle and determine which two of the sides we have so we know which one we want to use. So here we have 20. This is our opposite side. This is our adjacent side. This is our hypotenuse. Since we have the adjacent and the hypotenuse labeled, we want to use the cosine of 20 degrees. So we're going to say that the cosine of 20 is equal to the adjacent, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 19. And then we want to solve this for x, so we're just going to go ahead and multiply by the 19. So 19 times the cosine of 20 is equal to x. Now that's in degrees, so your calculator does need to be in degree mode, which if you're using one of these, it probably is. If you're on a Texas Instrument calculator, you want to check your default to make sure it's not in radians, but it's in degrees. And so, all we're going to do is punch it into our calculator. 19 cosine of 20 equals, and I'm getting on my calculator 17.854, dot, 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 dot. I want to round my answer to the nearest tenth, so this one I'm going to end up rounding up. And so 17.9 is going to be what the length of this side over here ends up being. So on the second one, if I'm looking for that one, I'm solving x in my right triangle. Again, I have this angle labeled, so this is my opposite, this is my adjacent, this is my hypotenuse. And again, I have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, so I'm going to use the cosine again. So I'm going to say that the cosine of 65 degrees is equal to the adjacent, which is 18, over the hypotenuse, which is x. Now in this one, when I solve it, first of all, I'm multiplying by my x. So I have x cosine of 65 equals 18. And then to get x by itself, I end up having to divide. So x is going to equal 18 divided by the cosine of 65. And so on my calculator, 18 divided by the cosine of 65 gives me 42.591. Rounding to the nearest tenth then, 42.6 would be my answer for how long my hypotenuse would be. So on number 3, again, we're going to solve. I look at that and I say, okay, this is my opposite, my adjacent, and my hypotenuse. This time I have the opposite and the hypotenuse, so I'm going to use the sine. The sine of 51 degrees equals the opposite side, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 8. So in order to solve that, I'm multiplying by the 8. So 8 sine of 51 is equal to x. And then, of course, I'm using my calculator again. So 8 times the sine of 51 degrees is 6.217. Rounding to the nearest tenth then, 6.2 is going to be the answer that I want to use.